This is a line by line analysis of the poetry The Eagle and the Mole, written by Elinor Wylie. Elinor Wylie, born in the year 1885, was an American poet and novelist. Though her personal life was filled with scandals related to multiple affairs and marriages, she was able to captivate the literary world with her writing skills. She was even ostracized for a much discussed love affair she had with a lawyer who was 17 years older to her, and because of this, she had to move to England. But later, during the First World War, she returned back to US. There, she spent most of her time interacting with literary figures like Edmund Wilson, Sinclair Lewis, John Dawes, who were interested in war related writings. And she also was influenced by their writing style, by their writing themes and ideas. And we can find this influence in her work as well. Her friends from this literary circle encouraged her to write poetry as well as get it published in the poetry magazine. And the magazine published four of her poems, and among them was her most widely anthologized poem, Velvet Shoes. Another one of her noted works was Nets to Catch the Wind, which became very popular and it also became an immediate success. So these are some of her other works, which are The Black Armor, then Jennifer Lawn, which is a novel, The Venetian Glass Nephew, again a novel, and Angels and Earthly Creatures, then The Orphan Angel, again, which is a novel. So these are some of her works, some of her most popular works. Eleanor always suffered from high blood pressure, and that was the reason that she died of stroke, and it was in the year 1928. So, this was a general introduction about the poet Elinor Wylie. It is just a brief biography about her. Now, we can move on to the line by line discussion of her poetry, The Eagle and the Mole. The Eagle and the Mole was first published in October of 1921 in Wiley's collection Nets to Catch the Wind. It has become one of the most popular pieces and also her most anthologized work as well. The use of animal imagery in this work is noted, and we can find that this is one common style used by Elinor Wylie throughout her writings, especially if we look at all the other poetry in the collection Nets to Catch the Wind, we can find the same animal imagery being used throughout. Now, talking about the structure of the poetry, we can find that the whole writing is divided into six stanzas. Each stanza has four lines, and the rhyme scheme of each stanza is A B A B. Now, talking about the theme of this writing, this particular poetry, we can find that she is describing an idealized way to live life, moving away from the contemporary society, moving away from the trend that is being created by the contemporary society. She idealizes individuality. Rather than following the crowd, she urges the readers to find their own individuality, and that is what the major theme of this writing is. And in order to explain this idea, she is using the images of an eagle and a mole. So we can start with the first stanza. Here she is talking about the eagle. Avoid the reeking herd, shun the polluted flock, live like the stoic bird, the eagle of the rock. The huddled warmth of crowds begets and fosters hate. He keeps above the clouds, his cliff inviolate. So, in the beginning itself, the poet is advising the readers to live like the stoic bird, which is the eagle who always remains away from the crowd, remains away from the flock. It always stays alone on the rock. So, the poet is urging the readers to be like that of the eagle and is requesting them to be avoiding the reeking or decaying herd or community or crowd and to stay away from this polluted flock. So here the polluted flock and reeking herd, all these words refer to the crowd or the society or the people of the society. The poet continues and mentions or says that the huddled warmth of the crowds begets and fosters hate. So she mentions that even though the crowd or even though the people always remain close, they pretend to care for each other, they pretend to have affection for each other, in reality they are fostering hate in their hearts. And we can try to refer this back to the war, the world war, where you people show affection for each other, but in the end they fight wars against each other. So that image can be identified through these lines. That is what she mentions: the huddled warmth of the crowd begets and fosters hate. Even though people show that they have affection for each other, in reality they are fostering hate, they are hiding hatred. It is like a mask that they have on their faces to hide the hatred that they have for each other. He keeps above the clouds his cliff inviolate. So the poet uses the pronouns he, his in order to refer to the eagle. And the poet is saying that regardless of how the crowd is moving, regardless of how the society is working, the eagle always remains above the clouds. That majestic nature of the eagle is being revealed through these lines. And the poet says that, the eagle is not bothered by what is happening amongst the crowds. The eagle always remains aloof from this, away from this, and has that majestic nature. So it remains away from the crowd and it is always above the clouds, flying high above the clouds. These lines indicates the powerful nature or the majestic nature of the eagle. And here the poet also mentions the cliff to be inviolate. Cliff is where the bird is seated, and inviolate means it can not be reached by the common folk. So here the poet is saying that even the place where the eagle is residing, it is not polluted by the trends or by the herd. So the eagle always remains away from this crowd. Moving to the next stanza, when flocks are folded warm and herds to shelter run, he sails above the storm, he stares into the sun. If in the eagle's track your sinews cannot leap, avoid the lathered pack, turn from the steaming sheep. Now, already the poet had mentioned how the eagle resides on a cliff which is inviolate, and continuing with the same idea, emphasizing on the same idea, the poet says that the eagle's place of safety is appealing to her, and she says how the eagle's home is above the storm and it is close to the sun. So that is what she says: he sails above the storm, he stares into the sun. So again these lines indicate the majestic nature, the powerful nature of the eagle. And she also mentions that how all the other animals, when there is a very difficult situation, when the weather is not in a favorable condition, what do the other animals do? They, when flocks are folded warm and herds to shelter run, so these other animals, they flee to shelter, they are scared of the environment and they run to find shelter. But what does the eagle do? The eagle sails above the storm. The eagle is unaffected by the changes in the nature, unaffected by the changes in the environment, unaffected even by the appearance of a storm. That is why the eagle is able to fly above the storm and even is able to stare into the sun. So, again, it shows the majestic nature of the eagle. So, here the eagle which remains unbothered or unaffected by the turn of circumstances, this indirectly or even directly speaks of the strength that this bird has. And it is this strength that she wants her readers to possess. It is this strength that she wants her readers to have. That strength of individuality. Now, if you look at the nature or if you try to understand the nature of this bird, the eagle is never found in packs. It always travels alone. It flies alone in the sky. So that individuality is what she is advising her readers to find. Rather than following the crowd, rather than following the trend, she wants her readers, or she wants everyone to chase their own individuality, their own uniqueness. That is what she is emphasizing when she speaks about the majestic nature or the strength of this bird. In the fourth stanza, she also addresses the possibility: what if one cannot match the strength of the bird? If one is unable to leap into the eagle's life, then also it's completely fine. She is not criticizing, she is not considering anyone to be inferior if they are not able to match the majestic nature or the strength of the eagle. That is what she mentions: if in the eagle's track your sinews cannot leap, avoid the lathered pack, turn from the steaming sheep. Even if you are unable to match the strength, even in this case, what you can do is you should still do whatever possible in order to avoid the pack, in order to avoid the decaying crowd. And you should not be like that steaming sheep, you should not be like a pack of sheep, you should not be following the crowd. Do whatever possible in order to avoid that polluted flock. That is what she is advising. You might not match the strength of the bird, you might not have the majestic nature of the eagle, but that is fine. That is completely acceptable. But what you have to do is, no matter whatever, in whatever ways possible, try to avoid that pack, try to avoid the crowd. Moving to the next stanza. If you would keep your soul from spotted sight or sound, live like the velvet mole, go burrow underground, and there hold intercourse with roots of trees and stones, with rivers at their source and disembodied bones. In this stanza, she brings the image of the mole, and she explains that, if you are not able to meet the majestic nature of the bird, of the eagle, it is completely fine. There is another option for seeking an escape. Rather than rising above the world's societal problems, you can go underground, you can burrow underground like that of the velvet mole. Now, by describing the mole as velvet, velvet is something not inferior, it does not have an inferior value, it is something very beautiful. So here the mole is not in any way considered inferior to the bird, but it is considered to be unique. Like that of the eagle, the mole, even though it's a very small creature, has its own uniqueness, its own individuality. So here the poet is not making a comparison between these two creatures, is not trying to say that one is better than the other, but the poet is suggesting that though different from each other, these two creatures have their own individuality, have their own uniqueness. So if you are not able to be like that of the majestic eagle, you can still be like that of the velvet mole. So the poet says that if you are not able to fly above the polluted flock, polluted crowd, what you can do? You can hide yourself underground. You can remain hidden from the crowd by moving underground. So that is the idea that is conveyed by the poet by comparing the individuality to that of the mole. And the poet says that, so when you go underground, when you burrow underground, you will have more interesting company rather than this crowd that is so fascinated in following the trend. Rather than the company of this polluted people, you will have the company of roots of trees and stones, with rivers at their source and disembodied bones. So, when you burrow underground, you will come in contact with roots of trees, and this place would allow one to become closer to both life and death. That is what the idea of trees and stones, and then there is a contrasting image of bones being shown, which indicates life as well as death. So, when you go underground, you will feel closer to both life and death. So, here one will be able to find peace away from the cluttered nature of life and the polluted nature of society. So that is what the poet is mentioning through this whole poem. She is suggesting that in order to remain away from the crowd, in order to remain away from this polluted flock, you can either be like that of the majestic eagle who can fly above the storm, or you can even be like that of the small creature which is the mole and burrow yourself underground, hide yourself underground. So, this is the whole line by line analysis of the poetry, The Eagle and the Mole, written by Elinor Wylie.